President Nana Akufo-Addo held discussions with German Federal Minister of Finance Christian Lindner last Friday at the Jubilee House in Accra, where he expressed his hope in finalizing the IMF deal. He said the main concerns of the government include the process of concluding talks with the IMF, as well as the specific assistance that would help Ghana fast-track the process of its economic recovery, at least by mid-March.
Now, Germany's finance minister was in Ghana for bilateral talks with the government, and the business communities are also to ensure Ghana of Germany's support to help Ghana get out of its current economic challenges. President Akufo-Addo welcomed the pledge by Germany to help the country overcome its current economic challenges and appealed to the German government to lend its support in that direction. Now, joining us for more updates on this is editor and political analyst Wilberforce Asare. He joins us from Ghana this morning. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Asare. Good morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. We've had something, around this conversation in the past, sometime last year. And of course, but it might be important that we once again talk about the importance of this deal to Ghana's economy, assistance from the IMF, and, financial assistance generally from the international community to Ghana's economy. How important is it at this time?
So to answer your rather very good question, I can tell you that Ghana's economy has struggled the last 1 year. In fact, the whole of the year 2022 was a very serious struggle. And this struggle was essentially motivated by the COVID-19 pandemic and also the Russian-Ukraine war, for that matter, the Russia invasion of Ukraine. Now, since July, or I believe June of last year, 2022, government has been trying to secure a deal with the International Monetary Fund, essentially to regain confidence of the international community for purposes of building our economy. It's been a struggle because Ghana has a very huge debt, and the IMF is requiring of us to have a debt restructuring before they will give us the $3 billion program that we are asking for. That domestic debt restructuring process has already started, and the deadline for that process is actually tomorrow, the 10th of February, 2023. And so, if you ask me about how important the IMF deal is, it's extremely important because Ghana is currently unable to go onto the international market to borrow. We've been downgraded by the rating agencies so badly, and it is only going to take IMF credibility to get us to be admitted back onto the capital markets in our world to be able to access capital. So that is how important the IMF program is to the rescue of the Ghanaian economy, which obviously is saddled by a huge debt, both domestic and international debt.
All right. Sometime last year, Ken Ofori-Atta had said that Ghana was not going to the IMF. There's been a change, of course. What happened between that time and now? Also, we have been talking about the fact that Ghana's CD has been struggling. Bloomberg did report that last year was listed as one of the worst struggling currencies in the world. How is that reflected in the economy today in Ghana?
Well, yes. So another good question, and the thing about it is that for Ghana, the finance minister, and for that matter, the entire Akufo-Addo government has always been skeptical about going to the IMF because they think that we should be able to manage our own affairs and we wouldn't need the Bretton Woods institutions telling us what to do and what not to do. Some part of the country agrees with that. Perhaps the majority believe that we should be able to manage our own affairs. However, one of the major attempts that the Ofori-Atta-led finance ministry, and for that matter, government decided to do in 2022 or 2021 into 2022 to rescue the economy was to introduce a tax that we call e-levy. It's electronic tax. So a tax that we're going to put on electronic transactions. It received a lot of backlash, especially from the opposition, so that the law, which was supposed to come into effect sometime in January 2022, as at June 2022, was still being debated and it only came into force, I think, in August 2022. So the delay affected the plan of the government, and for that matter, the finance minister, Ken Ofori-Atta. And that is what exacerbated the issues for us to get to where we are, where we needed to now go to the IMF, because the domestic remedy that we wanted to put in place was hindered by the opposition largely, and so it got frustrated. Eventually, it came into force, but by the time the law came into force, it had been so bastardized that it was no longer effective. In fact, it was introduced at 1.5% rate of a tax. However, in this new year, it was reviewed to 1% because of the level of unacceptability to domestically deal with these matters. And so that aspect of it is what I can explain as to the decision by the government to now go to the IMF after they had taken an entrenched position that they were never going to go to the IMF. The domestic remedy did not materialize. And so you have to now look external. Looking external, you have to go to the lender of last resort. The lender of last resort really is the International Monetary Fund. That is why they went there. Now, to answer the other aspect of your question, I think that we are where we are because of various factors. But primarily, it is because of external factors. And that is the reason why the government is bent on ensuring that between now and March, after securing the staff level agreement sometime in December last year, by March, that is 3 months after the staff level, Ghana will secure the board level agreement, which is what will ensure that we actually access the revenue that we need to access from the International Monetary Fund. So if you ask me, that's where we are, and it appears the government is doing everything possible to make sure that by the end of March 2023, the IMF board level agreement will be secured in order to put the economy back on a sound footing.
All right, can you shed, a little light on what Ghana's external debt currently is, and if there are any fears, with its debt to GDP ratio? Are those some of the concerns that, economists in Ghana, are having at this time, or is it, really desperate situation that those things do not matter at this point? Ghana just needs some type of financial assistance.
Yes, our tax to GDP ratio, or our debt, I should say, our debt to GDP ratio currently stands at almost 100%. I'll be very honest with you. And because of that magnitude of debt to GDP ratio, it tells you that virtually all the revenue you are raising is going into financing your debt. And so there is even no revenue left for you to pay salaries and all those kind of stuff. So what is being done now is the domestic debt exchange. In fact, for the external, the government is even not concentrating on it right now. It's a domestic. And by the domestic debt exchange, you are actually bringing a program that will help you not to be able to service your debt over a period of time. And if you are not servicing your debt over a period of time, what it does is that it gives you relief so that you can use that space to do other things to help resuscitate the economy. So if you are using 100% of your revenue to service your debt, and you are introducing a measure that will help you to cut down about 40% of that revenue servicing, then it tells you that you can have that 40% space to be able to do other things whilst you work to recover the economy. So essentially, all that is being done right now is that looking at the magnitude of the debt to GDP, the government has decided that, hold on, I can no longer be paying my debt owed you because I need to stabilize the economy. In fact, the economists are saying that our debt to GDP ratio should be 55%. So if we are at 100%, it means that we need to drop about 45%. And that's a lot of work that needs to be done. So that's where we are, and steps are being taken. The most important thing right now is that the government needs the buy-in of the ordinary Ghanaian. Because if it doesn't get the buy-in of the ordinary Ghanaian, it will become extremely difficult for any progress to be made as far as the shoring up of our, or as it were, bringing down our domestic debt downwards is concerned. So the buy-in of the ordinary Ghanaian is what the government is fighting for right now. And you see the government fighting for it with all effort to make sure that it can get all Ghanaians on board for purposes of reviving the economy. So that's where we are.
And are the Ghanaians cooperating as the government intended? Last year we talked about the bonds and some of the sacrifices those who had bonds had to make. Would you say that the audience, or rather the citizens of Ghana, are reacting in the way that the government is hoping to be able to get them to buy into the plans for the IMF?
So initially, it was a struggle because you've had individual bondholders saying that they are not interested in joining, bondholders in the pensions industry saying they are not interested in joining. But there's been a lot of broad consultation going on, and getting to the latter part of this whole process, you've seen a lot of individual bondholders signing on to the government program to the extent that the system for the signing actually even crashed. And so the government had to revive the program or the software in order to give them some 3-day vacuum to now sign on. So I can tell you that initially getting the buy-in was difficult. But as we speak today, the buy-in is revived, and it would appear that the target that the government set for itself to have 80% participation in the domestic debt exchange is almost achieved. And I choose my words carefully, almost achieved. And so by the end of tomorrow, which is the 10th of February, the last day for the extension, the finance ministry is required to tell all of us the extent to which the domestic debt exchange program has been successful, whether the target of 80% has been achieved. If it hasn't been achieved, what has been achieved? Is it sufficient to get us to the targets that the government is setting for itself? So all of these things will come up, but I can tell you that the process started very slow because of opposition, but after broad consultations, the participation has really increased and people are getting involved.
Mr. Sari, can you, in 30 seconds, convince Ghanaians who have the fear of the IMF? There are many countries who believe, or many people who believe, that once you get into deals with the IMF, you never get out. It's not very, very encouraging, what it currently looks like with the Ghanaian economy, that they will be able to pay back these debts and be able to, meet up with IMF targets. So is there any way you can convince Ghanaians that, this is not going to be detrimental to the Ghanaian economy over time, and they will at some point be able to pull out from seeking bails from the IMF?
When the current government came to office, the Akufo-Addo government in 2017, Ghana was on an IMF program, which started in 2016 during the Mahama government. So the first 3 years of the Akufo-Addo government, 2017, 2018, 2019, the Akufo-Addo government was on an IMF program, which it inherited. It managed to get us out of it only until 2020, when COVID-19 came, and we have had to go back to the IMF in 2022, 2023. So if you ask me about IMF with this particular government, for 3 years they were on a program. They were able to get Ghana out of the IMF program. They have had to go back now during their time. I believe that they'll be able to work it out and get us out of the IMF program. Largely, we will prefer that we are on our own than to be on an IMF program. Nobody will want to be living on borrowed money. You want to be living on money that you earned.
Absolutely. And we hope that, Ghana finds a way around this, get the loan and get out of the bind as quickly as possible. Thank you very much, Wilberforce Asare, for joining us as always. We look forward to having you join us again.
Thank you for having me.